All right, welcome everybody to week 13, day 1. We're going to continue our discussion of Quake today, and I'm going to actually do something I think that's going to be pretty useful for you. I'm going to put together like a Q&A document that you can actually refer to later on, which is like, how do I do this in QuakeC? Maybe even we can do it for Unreal Engine as well. That'd be kind of fun. So let's get to it. If you need to play some more Quake, let me know too. We can always do that as well. So, if you don't have an idea for the mod, just play the game some more, and something will annoy you, I'm sure, at some point. So, let's see here. Not Computer Science 1. This is IS50A. And linear algebra nodes. We do need to do more linear algebra. I did talk to the EA internship coordinator last year. This might be useful for you guys before we move on. So, basically, if you want to be an intern at EA, you have to be at a 4-year university. I'm like, but I'm at a 2-year university. Does that count? They're like, yeah, that's fine. So, it doesn't count if you're like at Full Sail Academy or some like trade school, but community college is fine. The requirement is you're going to be going back to school after next summer. So, if you want to apply to EA, might as well. Might as well. There's a lot of people that apply for the EA internship program. You're probably not going to get in, but it's worth applying to because, like, who cares? Like there's no downside to it. And if you get in, you get in. It's just it's like a free pull on a jackpot machine. You know what I mean? So I did talk to their internship coordinator about a year ago and found out what I could find for you guys. And basically, all the internships are paid. In general, you should never accept an unpaid internship. That's called slavery, and it's a bad idea, I hear. So they will cover your travel expenses and a housing stipend during the pandemic. A lot of the work was virtual. I don't know. I'd have to call them again and find out if they're back in person or if they're virtual. But yeah, you get paid to learn to make games. So cool. They've got offices around the country, and Austin does things like SWTOR, Star Wars: The Old Republic, BioWare Austin, things like that. LA is probably the closest one. San Francisco is the closest one to us. So yeah. They want people that know C++. So if you've taken my C-Sci 40 and 41 classes, you're in a good shape. The development they do is in C++. So a lot of colleges don't produce C++ programmers, or they do it as a secondary language. We do Java as a secondary language, and Python as a distant third. Maybe assembly is a third, and then Python is a distant fourth language. But they're hiring C++, so yay, go you. But you don't have to be a programmer. They hire lots of people. So if you have taken like a Blender class or some other 3D modeling class, you can become a modeler, you can become a technical artist, you can become a UI designer, that kind of stuff. Some of you guys were like, I want to do design. They don't hire interns to do design. That's strictly that's strictly a full-time experienced person position to design the next, FIFA. You can't just have an intern design the next FIFA. That just wouldn't work. Okay, we're going to take the old one. We're going to hit copy. We're going to hit paste. And we're going to change the date from 21 to 22. We're going to get a different cover art on it. We're going to update the stats. Mic drop. Done. So, apply to Epic for web developer position. Cool. Yeah. They only do one-to-one hiring. So Google hires a pool of interns that then get kind of partitioned out to people. The way that it works at EA is that you interview at a team, and so a team will basically like call you in and be like, look, we need somebody who does web development, and then you like do an interview and you're like, here's my web development stuff and here's what I can do, and yeah. So each team hires exactly one intern. So in Austin, they have 18 teams or something like that, so they hire 18 interns. It's not a lot. Like 1,000 people apply for this. So, your odds are are not great, but like I said, doesn't cost anything. Worst that'll happen is you get a turn down. Cool. But you have to think of it as just like a free pull on a slot machine, right? If you go into a casino and they're like, hey, you get a free pull on this $1 million jackpot, which I've seen before actually. They had this huge slot machine set up, and every person walking in can do exactly one pull, and I'm like, sure, walk up, bloop, loose, okay, thanks, like, sure, you could play additional pulls on it for like $1 each. So I'm like, no, I'll take my free one, thank you very much. Oh, I didn't get anything, cool. And that's the attitude you have to have towards like applying for jobs and things like that, by the way, is you have to just think of them as just a free pull on the slot machine. It just takes a little bit of your time to like put together a resume, which you should have anyway, so most internships are over the summer. Madden internships are in the fall, so they get posted in September, so it might be too late already, so it's probably worth checking that website there. Don't just send LinkedIn requests to recruiters. That was something she was kind of adamant about. Like, they hate getting harassed by people, I want a job in game industry. If they've asked you for a resume, then it's fine. If you've talked to them in person, it's fine. But like, don't just like out of the blue, just try spamming people. That really annoys them. Conferences are a great way of meeting people because you get that face-to-face connection. They kind of see what you're like, and so GDC is the annual, except when it's canceled due to pandemic, conference that takes place in San Francisco every year. I've taken my students to it before. It's a good conference, and student access is reasonably cheap. I've paid full price before, and it's expensive to go. Grace Hopper is the International Women's Computer Science Conference, and so I know there are a few women in this class. That's probably worth going to. Companies these days are really big on diversity and stuff like that. Like, you look at what happened at Blizzard, right? Like, they're actively hiring women. Sorry, men. But they're actively hiring women. And so if you go to the Grace Hopper Festival, go to the EA booth there, show your stuff, show me what you got. You're like, boom, here's my portfolio, I made this. Then, good chance you'll get an invitation to at least apply to one of the teams. You kind of get past the first screening process. Because, imagine like a wave of zombies, they're all trying to get the jobs, and if somebody's like, here, come inside, and they like pull you inside, you still got to interview. But you've made it past the first part, which is the hard part. The hard part is just like getting past the wave of being a nameless person with a resume, just like everyone else's. Like getting past that initial screen. Once I get past that part, I feel pretty confident. And one thing, one reason is because I interview pretty well. I've got a decent amount of confidence and a decent amount of tech skills, and that's what you need to do to get a job, right? You need to be personable, and you need to talk to people and answer questions and be, use good words big, well, So, empathy, yeah. Screw your empathy. No, yeah, it's just about, and a big part of it is just like looking for a fit between the team and you, and so can you get along with them? Finding common ground is a really big thing. Like, oh, you main Tracer as well? So do I. That's cool, So, finding some common ground. Oh, you're from San Diego? What part of San Diego are you from? Oh, it's so cool. Yeah, I grew up right next there. Like, I've literally, and then they're like, oh, So, yeah, anything like that is all good. But, getting in to the industry is the hard part. So, once you're in the industry. And once you've been on a team that's released a AAA title, then you're in, and you're safe from the hordes of people outside all trying to get into the games industry. So the hardest part is that first opening of the door and pulling you in and be like, quick, get inside before somebody else sees that there's a door open here. And so conferences are a great way of doing that. I've been to like E3. That's where I met one of my personal heroes, Robin Walker. He's the guy who developed Team Fortress, right? And he developed it while he was a college student in Australia somewhere. and released it for free on the interwebs. And he released the source code, which I really appreciate because he was a believer in free and open source. And I took his source code and modded it and released it as free and open source. And I am a firm believer in the FLOSS tradition, free, libre, open source. So, second interview coding test tomorrow at 9:30, $42 an hour. Just sleep well, get a lot of rest. So he loved me because you're passionate coding. We connected instantly because of your YouTube channel. Yeah. Once you connect with somebody and you're kind of like, oh, you played this game too. Oh, what did you think about Fallout 76? It's kind of garbage. Yeah, me too. And so there's always that risk that you're gonna say is garbage one of their games, and then it's but so it's in general it's safer to be positive. I played it for a while. It wasn't really for me. Is a better way of putting that. Unless you want to roll those dice and hope they think it's garbage too. But in general, being positive is the safe move to me. So the woman that I talked to applied to 20 positions before she got in at EA. So that's a 5% success rate. So you should not allow a rejection to get you down. You know what I mean? So, and then she applied 20 more times before she got into Blizzard. Typical internships have 700 applicants, right? So you've got a wave of zombies coming in, and so having some advantage, some person to person. I got my professorship here because I had taught here as an adjunct, and they knew me, and they'd come by and see me lecture. I used to have a poster up behind me, for I gave a talk on cybersecurity and stuff like that, and some of the one of the professors came by and sat in on my talk and was kind of nodding okay, yeah. And so then they hired me, right? Out of a pool of 30 people applying for one professorship, I got it. Why? Because they knew me, or because I'm just so dashingly charismatic and stuff. But they knew what they were getting. It's do you want to roll the dice and hope the person isn't a complete ass or something? You take the person, pretty good, I guess. Take them. So you need to do something to stand out. Because there's a lot of people applying for the position, right? Demonstrating growth over time, being excited about the field, eagerness to learn, especially. Have a personal website like Spraggins has. Having a portfolio, showing your previous work. Make sure you talk about what engine. They want to see UE4 and Unity, even though they all work in the Frostbite engine, or whatever they're calling it these days. Which is not available. You can't learn the Frostbite engine until you work at EA, which is one of the reasons why their Frostbite engine kind of sucks, right? Because there's not a giant pool of people that know it inside and out. And so there's a limited number of people that are Frostbite specialists, and these people get pulled off projects, and that's one of the reasons why Mass Effect Andromeda failed, and Anthem failed, was in very large part because they don't have an open source game engine. And the number of people that actually know how to make it do what they need to do for these games, because Anthem, they're flying. Mass Effect Andromeda is an open world. It's not a first-person shooter. Frostbite was designed for Call of Duty, right? It's a first-person shooter. And they're trying to, turn it into an open world game, and the engine doesn't work very well when it's not doing the kinds of games that it was designed to do. And so that's one of the reasons why so many of these big AAA titles from EA and BioWare in particular, because these people are working on Mass Effect Andromeda, they get pulled off to do FIFA. It's but we need them to make our game. Sorry, FIFA's a bigger moneymaker than Mass Effect. So I love cybersecurity. Yeah, cool. Yeah, and so you can't practice Frostbite, but you can practice on UE4 and in Unity, and soon UE5. UE5 will be out in a couple months, I think. So if it's a group project, part of the project you're on, you must have the following. You have to have a website, a GitHub, a portfolio, resume, and a list of technical skills. Every time you apply to a position, read the prereqs, make sure that your resume has those keywords on it. If it requires 3 years of Java, say, I have 5 years of Java, or whatever it is, right? They should be able to scan your resume and be check, 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 check. Don't make them hunt for it. Okay, and this is just general job hunting advice. Don't make people hunt for your stuff. If the thing says you require C++, assembly, Python, whatever, you just and you can have a resume, and then you can like tweak your resume for each job you apply for and just put it front and center. Here are the things that I have. Putting it in the same order. It's great. Check, 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 check. Okay, cool. He meets all the things. Pull him in for an interview. Don't like expect them to be like, okay, he's coded in various coding languages over the years. What does that even mean? I don't know what various means. Pfft, trash, right? So your thing needs to match, you know. She recommends making lots and lots of terrible projects, you know, so that you can finally make one that's good. Show iterations in your portfolio, right? Like show that you can keep iterating and revising, because that's what game development's all about. Game development is all about iterating, right? Playing, refining, testing, purifying the design, figuring out what works. If it doesn't work at all, throw it away, and keep all those in your portfolio so you can show your progress over time, because that's what they care about. If you do get hired as a C++ programmer, you're going to go to a boot camp to learn the Frostbite engine. So she wants you to become familiar with UE4 Unity instead. If you're not good at C++, get good, scrub. Like, that was literally, like, more or less what she said. Like, sorry, you need to be good before you come here, because we're going to take you on a fantastic voyage through Frostbite, which is not easy, and so you need to be good before you do that. They have an art competition every year. So they don't hire the interns directly at Blizzard. You apply to the Blizzard art competition, and so based on whoever does the best in the art competition is who they pick to be their interns, which is kind of cool. They hire IT people, tools, you know. So there's a lot of jobs beyond just game development. There's a whole support system that supports game development as well. People position hop. I've had friends that started as QA people that jumped into mat level design. Usually you don't just hop into coding because you have to know how to code, right? But there are people that are coders that started as QA guys, like, hey, by the way, I know how to code. You need help, you know? But at some companies, the QA people are like put in a different building, right? And they're like, don't talk to the programmers, you know, only through... And then some places, like, you're all in the same room, and the QA guy's like, hey, by the way, there's a bug here, and I'm pretty sure I know what causes it. You're using an unsigned integer to hold your ammo, and so when we switch out of the weapon, it puts a bullet back in, and then when we reload, it goes negative, which overflow, you know. And then they're like, oh, you know coding. It really depends on the... It really depends on the company, right? Whether the QA people are kind of like put in a shed somewhere and told not to talk to anybody, or it could be just you're in a collegial environment. And my friends who are QA people were in that kind of environment, and they kind of job hopped around. And so they started in QA, and that's usually an easy job to get, because QA is kind of a... it's not for everybody, let's put it that way. I have some friends that have done QA their whole life, and they love it. But a lot of people, like, they do it, and they kind of burn out and get tired of it. Make sure you always ask questions if you get an interview, because you're interviewing them as well, right? So you're interviewing them to see if you're going to like working there, and they want to see you making those questions, right? So you know how much crunch time do we have? You know, is mandatory? You know, tell me about overtime. Like, what's the expectations for overtime? You know, do you have flex time? You know, swing shifts, that kind of stuff. And yeah, and so interviews are about your tech skills and about how good you're going to mesh with the team. They bring in famous people to do talks to the interns and things like that, so that's kind of fun. If you fail, keep trying. You know, the odds of success if you're just a nameless person are pretty low. They go up though if you know somebody, right? So once you get that foot in the door and start like interviewing instead of just getting rejected out of hand, you know, then you can eventually get a position. Okay, so all right, so that is my advice on applying. So what we're going to do today is I'm just going to put together a Q&A on how to do things in QuakeC and UE4, which is soon going to become UE5. Okay. So, What kinds of things do you want to know how to do? Don't just let them tell you what's what. Research your company. Yeah. Like, if I'm interviewing somebody, and I'm like, hey, why do you want to come to Fresno? You live in Tennessee right now. Why do you want to come to Fresno? What's the draw for you? And they're like, oh, that wonderful California weather. I know now that you do not know what Fresno is like in the summertime. Yeah, we're not in Southern California, right? This is not San Diego. This is Fresno. Yeah, she did not do her research. That is absolutely right. And I was just like, wonderful California weather, huh? So, all right. So, what kinds of things do you want to know how to do in QuakeC? That wonderful smoke screen. Tell the weather is similar to whatever hell's temperature's like. Look at the death cloud. Yeah, it's like pit brown outside. There's like smoke billowing out of the mountains 24/7. It's 190 degrees. Like, yeah, that's yeah. Okay. So, what kinds of things? Play sound. How about that? Play sound. Set a model on an entity. What other kinds of things do you want to do in a video game? Traceline. What else? Radius search. What else? Make an entity. Destroy an entity. I think God is trying to set California on fire, but keeps failing. Yeah, jeez. Yeah. It's almost like our forest management systems don't work very well. No. Change velocity. Change position. Velocity of an entity. I'm just going to say entity for everything here. Entity. So, change the velocity of something, sure. Damage, how do you damage something? What else? What other things do you want to know how to do inside of a video game? Both for QuakeC and for UE4. Is that it? Is this all you need to make a game? That it? That's all you guys want to know? That covers everything? Pick up an item. Okay. We'll do these. Well, I'll explain both of these in QuakeC and Unreal Engine. Is that it? That's all I need to know. Sound, model, particle effects, maybe. Okay. So in QuakeC, let's just go through this. So first, you have to pre-cache the sound, and I will give the function name for QuakeC. Your job is to Control-Shift-F, find examples of it being used, and modify to suit your purposes. Okay. So it's loading. Okay. So Control-Shift-F, pre-cache, underscore sound. Pre-cache the sound first with pre-cache sound. And the open close parentheses mean it's a function. Then you can play a sound with sound. Oops. Yep. Unreal Engine. Can you remember how to do that? I'll let that load. Set a model. Okay, anytime now in Unreal Engine. So there's a function called setModel. First, you have to pre-cache the model. Then use setModel. Okay. So all the pre-caches go into basically just Control-Shift-F, find where people are pre-caching things already, copy and paste the line, and change the path. You're going to have some wave file or something you want to play the sound. You change ogre.wave to kearney.wave or whatever, and then it works. Same thing for models. You have to pre-cache all models, and the reason for this is so that when you connect to a server, the server has a comprehensive list of all sounds and models that are used, and it can download them to the client if the client doesn't have them. So you pre-cache it first. Again, you Control-Shift-F how to do that, and then use setModel. Okay, so Traceline is with a Traceline function. In Unreal Engine, it's called line trace. Same thing, just a little different. Let's see here. Fortnite. That's still around? That's cool. All right. It is our fall 2021. Okay, radius search in. It's called find radius. And this returns a list of objects within X units of the given point. Again, just look at, or within the given entity, I think. You give it an entity and you give it a radius and it finds everything within it. And so what you want to do is just look at existing code that does find radius and copy and paste it and modify to suit your needs. You're going to hear me say this over and over again, but that's literally how modding works. Like you just rather than trying to do everything from scratch. And this is one of the greatest things about modding is that you don't start with just a blank notepad file and be like, make World of Warcraft. Instead, you're given a working game, and they've probably done something already related to what you're trying to do. And so you just need to find that, and then copy it and paste it into the part you're working on, and then tweak it. Like, you know, maybe you want it so that like when you shoot a bullet, that it does radius damage, right? It's like the bullets fragment. So you shoot, it hits a wall, and it fragments bullets or something like that. You know, how would you do that? I'm stopping talking now. How would you do that? Like, how would you modify the shotgun so that when you fired the shotgun, if you hit a wall, if you hit a person, it'd be fine. It'd do damage. But if you hit a wall, that it would fragment and shoot fragments of bullets everywhere. Which of these tools would you use? Do some design. Hazelton, Diaz, Selecki, Stover, Wong, Spraggins. You guys understand the task? Like, I'm going to shoot my closet back there. Boom. I miss. I hit the wall. It fragments. I can think of at least 3 different ways that I'd implement this. How would you do it? Traceline to figure out the hit. Sure. That's the common bit, right? I fire a bullet. I do traceline from my position to the direction, to my position plus the direction I'm looking times whatever the range of the bullet is, 2,000, whatever. Pretty long range. It hits something. Now what? Whenever collision detected, animate into fragment motions. Fragment like hit particles or the door is destroyed. I mean, like the bullet itself, like ricochets essentially, but it breaks into pieces, and pieces of the bullet fly nearby, hitting people. So, like if you shoot a bullet next to somebody's head, it'll fragment and hit them in the head for a little bit of damage or something. It could be a fun weapon to do. Destructible Mesh in Unreal Engine, yeah. QuakeC does not have destructible meshes. It only has static meshes. It does even have skeletal meshes, although technically it does now. But the Quake engine, the Quake 1 engine is only static meshes. And so all the animations are done by changing the model on something over and over again to do animation. So it's like bloop, 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 bloop. Animation's probably another tool. So how'd you do it? Whenever collision detected, animate into fragment motions. Well, if we do a trace line, it's not a collision, right? A trace line just tells you what's that way, right? And it'll return the point at which the trace line hits something. And then you can, if it hits something, it'll return an entity. And you can probably put a note in there as to what's actually returned. Trace line from one point to another, and returns not technically returning these things because they're globals, but make sure I got the terminology right on it. No, it isn't. What's it called? Trace underscore int. Abbreviated the wrong thing. So on a hit with a wall, run a for loop to generate a number of sub-bullets aimed away from the wall. Yeah. And you could have them probably reflect around the normal. So there is also the trace normal. Trace. Yeah, trace end pause. Trace underscore plane underscore normal. So for example, if you shoot a laser beam at a wall, the normal is a vector sticking out of the wall. And so what you can do is you can actually reflect the laser beam around the normal and have the laser beam shoot off, right? And so you do a chain lightning weapon that might even do that 3 times or something. So it goes, should be kind of fun. On a hit with a wall, run a for loop to generate a number of sub-bullets aimed away. Yeah, so what you do, if you want to do that, is when you hit, you fragment, you do like 4 trace lines, reflecting off in different directions, and you do damage that way. So you hit a wall, and then you, based on the normal vector, you reflect them off in different angles around the normal vector, and if it hits something, it does damage. So that's definitely one way of doing it. What other ways are there? Hazelton, what's your thought? I'm going to make a fragmenting bullet. Hazelton, you here? So if you want to find all objects, oh, no, it is a point. Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay, so basically you give it a point and you say find everything within 40 units of a point. So this is another way you can do fragmenting bullets. So you hit a wall and you do a find radius around it, and you basically say everybody within 40 units of the point that I hit. If it just returns wall, that means there's nothing there. We're done. Otherwise, this is actually literally the code right here. So while the thing that we found is not the world, if the thing we found was a player, then we would do damage to them rather than spot found. We would do damage here. And then we say move to the next element of the chain. It returns a linked list if you've taken computer science. It returns a linked list of all objects that are near this point within that radius. And so you just follow the entity equals entity.chain over and over again until it equals the world. And so what you do is you don't have to worry about how any of that works. You just copy and paste the code, and then you change the relevant bit. The relevant bit is here. So this code here is to find out if there's a spawn point that is open. So what it's doing is that it is going through all the spawn points in the world and then seeing if there's a if the spot's open. So it's searching in a 40 unit radius around a spawn point, and if a player is within 40 units of the spawn point, then it says no, we've not found a point, and then it goes on to the next it goes on to the next thing. And if any of the things within 40 units is a player, then it's like can't spawn there. And it does that so that people don't telefrag each other. So when you spawn into the world, it finds an open spot that's available to teleport in. Only if there's none of them available, then it'll telefrag you. What if there's no spawn point? That's a good question. It will return world if there's no spawn point available. So what does that do? Let's find out. It gets called exactly one time. If your team number is not 0, it finds a spawn point for your team, and it will, if it's world, if spot is not equal to world, it returns that spot. So it finds a team spawn location. If it can't find a team spawn location, then if it's co-op mode, which it won't be, if it's deathmatch mode, which it won't be, it looks for any other spot in the world called info player start, and if there's none of those available, then it crashes the server. But basically, if all your team spawn points are taken, then it will spawn you at an info player spot, and it'll put you there, and it'll telefrag anybody who is on top of you. So you have to have at least one of these in order to have a map. You have to have a place where the player will spawn. Otherwise, the server will go down and be like, we can't find an info player start. Sorry. So your map's bad. Your map has to have at least one info player start on it to drop somebody in. And if there's somebody there already, sucks to be them. Let's go back up one more level, select spawn point, Control-Shift-F. You guys see how this works? And we see that there is a couple places where we call select spawn point. Let's come in here. So it spawns a teledeath. So that's what telefrags people. So when you spawn, before you spawn, it explodes everybody on that spot. So anytime you teleport to a spot, it kills everybody there already. So that there's no, you don't have two people on the same spot, which is how you get people falling through the world and things like that. So anytime you teleport, it just kills everybody there already. Unless they're invincible. If they're invincible, then you die instead, I think. If you try telefragging somebody that's invincible, you die instead. It's kind of funny. Yeah, okay. So, so you can do a fragmenting bullet with a find radius. And so basically, you shoot a bullet, you find everybody nearby, and just damage them. That way you don't have to make projectiles like Stover had. You can just, if there's just somebody within this much radius of the wall, they just take damage. So you shoot, you miss somebody, but you hit right next to them, then they take a little bit of splash damage. You know, and that'd be an interesting weapon. That'd be an interesting weapon, a fragmentation gun or something that you can just kind of hit near people. You can shoot at their feet, and the fragments will hit them and stuff like that. That's another way of doing it. Okay, so spawning an entity is just called spawn in QuakeC. So that's one of the things about game development, is that there's usually like a lot of different ways of doing the same thing. You know what I mean? And you kind of have to think about, all right, well, how do we want it? Yeah. And so yeah, you just spawn. Everything is spawned, by the way. That makes a new entity in the world. Spawn. Then you're going to set attributes on it. And this is called spawn actor by class name, I think. Something like that. Let's see here. Main character. So, do you guys find Unreal Engine easier to use than QuakeC? Or, I mean, you haven't really played with QuakeC too much, I guess. Haven't had you do anything in it yet. Maybe I should just give you a homework assignment to do something in it. That might help you learn it better. Yeah, spawn actor. Spawn actor from class. Yeah, the good news about QuakeC is that everything is one type. All entities are just one type. And so you want to see if it's a player that hit you, late line trance. That's funny. Trace. Is you just check the dot class name. But yeah, that's actually a good question. Like, what is the class of something that touched me? Right, so in Unreal Engine, you can try casting the thing that touched you to a player, third-person player blueprint, and if it is, you do one thing. If it's not, you do another thing. In QuakeC, you just check. Every entity in the world has a class name, and you can see, was I hit by a grenade? Was I hit by a demon? Was I hit by a bullet? Was I hit by a, you know? And so they just have, it just works that way. And it's just other. So you have a touch. If you have a touch function, okay. Handle collision. That's actually probably we should insert rows below. So you set a dot touch function on an entity, and it will get called every time it collides with something. In a real engine event hit, and you have to make sure the entity will generate hit events or nothing will happen. Okay. It's actually easier kind of in QuakeC. You just set a touch function called Bill's touch function, and then every time that object bounces off a wall or something, it'll call Bill's touch function, and you can check to see what you collided with. And if it's the world, you do nothing, you just keep bouncing around. And if it's a player, you inflict damage and keep bouncing around. But if it's a demon, you dispel it. You know. So every time it collides with something, other is set to the thing we hit. And on this one, you have to break the hit script to see the details. So in Unreal Engine, every time you hit something, event damage. Do we have collision on this? And that tells you all the details, right? Timers are also a big thing. Do something in X seconds. Set the think function to the function that gets called in X seconds, and set self.next, or is it one word? It's one word, yeah. Next thing. So whatever X is. So if you want something to happen in 3 seconds, you set self.nextThing equal to time plus 3. And 3 seconds from now, whatever, you know, if you say like self.think equals Bob or something like that, then Bob will be called in X seconds. In Unreal Engine, we can use a delay node, timers, timelines. Yeah, really just a delay node. It's the easiest way of doing it. So, then how do you do timers? Set a next think to time plus X seconds. And then when that function is called, set next think equal to time plus X seconds. It will trigger the function every X seconds. And here we can use a timer or a timeline, different ways of doing that, or event tick with the delay node. Just realized I'm using MS Word. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just kind of writing notes on how you do all these things. How do you play a sound in Unreal Engine? What do you guys think the function is to play a sound? So there's a couple different ways of playing a sound. You can play a sound without it being in the world, or you can play a sound at location. Right. So sound 2D. Plays interface sound attenuation. Play sound at location. The sound is physically in the world. And you can play a sound attached to an object. Spawn sound attached. Okay. Is this helpful for you guys? Just kind of get a cheat sheet of all the different things you can do. These are all the tools in your toolbox, right? You just kind of set a model on an entity. You just kind of like edit the blueprint. I think there is actually a set model. Mesh, pull that out. Set skeletal mesh. And then for static meshes, like let's set the static mesh. To do a radius search to find everything around a point, that would be in like our glitter ball thing. I don't think it happened here. Let's see. Multisphere trace by channel. So basically, you do a multi-sphere trace for, using the same start and end points. And so when you do that, same start and end points, right? This returns an array, and then you do a for each loop. So over every object within the radius of the start and end point, which is the same thing, it's going to give you a list of everything within the array, and then you can loop over it and push it and things like that. Yep. So very useful skill to find things nearby. All right. Distrainity. There's a couple functions for this. Deremove is the basic one. Let's see if I can remember the name of the other one. Just remove. Yeah. So remove is a built-in function. And then so remove is a function that just deletes the entity. But then what is the difference between that and deremove? Deremove equals it's a safer remove function. So if you try removing the world, it'll tell you, because you can't delete the world. If you call deremove on a player, then it tells you that's also not allowed. And it also prevents something from being deleted twice. So then it calls remove. Okay, so deremove is just the safer way to remove something. Yeah, so let's do that. Okay. And then in Unreal Engine, Distractor. To change the position of an object in the world, there is a member variable called, what is it? Origin. Yeah. So origin holds a position. So QuakeC has kind of a weird thing for doing vectors, because it's a 3D engine. It has built-in support for 3D vectors, and so you can set something like this, and this will set the origin's x to 10. The So you can set all three at once, or you can individually set something by using the underscore thing like that. Ignore. Oh my gosh, I don't want grammar checking. This is code. It's not grammar. Okay, so do you guys see that? So if you use the underscore x, underscore y, underscore z, that picks out the x component or the y component or the z component. This isn't C. It's not C++. It's QuakeC. It's its own weird programming language. Okay. And over here, it's like what? World location. Set world. Set world location. For changing the velocity on something, it's actually a lot easier in QuakeC than in others. We need to talk about how to get the forward vector too. It's the velocity. And then in Unreal Engine, can't set velocity on the player easily, but if we do this, if something has a physics setup on it, we can set it there. So for objects with physics enabled, the forward vector is the way that an entity is looking. And so you call make vector. So in QuakeC, there's a lot of globals, like we talked about. So when you call make vectors, you pass in a direction something's looking, and that creates a vector for the forward component, the up component, and the right component. And these are in Unreal Engine as get forward vector, get right vector, and so you pass in a rotation and it returns a vector pointing in that direction to the right of it, and then there's get up vector. Any questions about this? It's been kind of quiet today. Sort of giving you a complete encyclopedia of all the tools you need to make a game. For both Unreal Engine and QuakeC. No questions? It's all straightforward? Too boring? It's fine. It's all good if you mod something other than Quake? Sure. Absolutely. The original plan was pretty simple. You should make another small one. I would just increase the scope of it, really. Camera. You could mod 2 games, sure. I don't see why not. Seems like a little extraneous, though. Bounding box. So if you want to, there's different ways you can have objects interact with the world. You can set it to solid, not, and then the thing will just pass through things. Normally, though, we want objects to be solid, and they want to bounce off other things. And so we do it like this. We set the size using the set size function, and then that will set the bounding box on the missile. So basically, even though you see a rocket flying around, it's actually a rectangular solid. In this case, it would be a 20 by 20 by 20 rectangular solid centered on the origin of the rocket, and it'll fly through space and impact things that way. Here, you have to set a collision mesh, and you can use either a simple collision or a complex collision, and can generate a complex collision hole automatically in the model viewer thingy. So a lot of the assets that come in Unreal Engine actually don't have collision meshes set on them, which is kind of weird if you think about it. Like, I think the door or whatever, content, I think this door maybe, let's see. No, this one's solid. is solid. This one. You can actually just walk right through it. You see that? See? You walk right through it. So by default, this thing is not solid, which is kind of an odd thing because the whole point of a door is to be solid. You know what I mean? And so if you double click on it and you go into this like model viewer thing here, you can go up to the collision thing and go to auto convex collision and hit apply, and then it will generate a collision mesh for you. So it's collision, write this down. Auto convex collision. Like that. And then now if we save that and play the game, can't run into it. Okay. Okay. Inflicting damage in QuakeC. Inflicting point damage and radius damage are a little bit different. Let's see, insert flow. So inflicting point damage is with TFT damage, and radius damage is with T radius damage. And then let me make sure I spell that right. TFT damage. Yeah, okay. And then inside of Unreal Engine, we do damage using event any damage. Event damage. Let's see here. Event point damage. Yeah. And to afflict damage is point damage. Apply point damage. And then for the grenades, things like that. Then it is event radial damage. No space there. Let's apply radial damage. and this does damage. Fall off automatically. So the further you are away from a grenade explosion, the less damage you take. I believe. Let me just double check. T radius damage. Let's find radius and let's see here. Just damage. Yeah, so the number of points you take is based on how far away you are from it. So there's a damage fall off on it. So it subtracts damage based on how far you are away from the thing. So I think it starts at full damage and it drops down to like half by the time you're at the edge of the radius. Okay, add a modifier to damage. This is a question one of you had. You are going to modify the TFT damage function to allow double damage or whatever in some cases. Add a damage type for the event damage system. So in Unreal Engine, if you want something to do double damage, or if you want to have a fire type or something like that, you can, there's this damage type thing here. And so you can add a new damage type and say, okay, if I'm taking fire damage, I take double, unless I have armor, and then I take half or something like that. So it basically works the same way in QuakeC. In QuakeC, a damage type is passed in, and then you can be like, all right, if I'm a player and I've got armor, I take half damage from fire, but if I've got armor, I take double from lightning or something. I don't know. You can basically just sort of do it however you want. It is in the function called TFT damage, and it is a big honking function. And if you want to know where it is, look for the equal sign. This is actually something I really like about QuakeC, is that when you define a function, there's little equals there. And so that actually tells you where the thing is made. So it's actually a lot easier to find a function definition just by staring at that equal sign there. And so you can do something like, say, if we're inflicting explosion damage, and if we're inflicting explosion damage and the person has a half explosion damage armor on, then you take half damage from it. If they have electricity preventing armor on and we're doing electricity damage or nail damage, then they take half. If we're inflicting fire damage and they have an asbestos armor on, they take half. And so there's yeah. And so this would be where you do the kind of stuff to like inflict double damage if you have a certain power up or something like that. To pick up an object in QuakeC, you set a touch on the object, and when something touches it, you see if their class name equals player. And if so, do something. Right. So maybe you keep track of how many flowers they've picked up or something, and every time you pick up a flower, it increments the flower thing. Inventory player should have a variable or a map if you want to be fancy, holding how many flowers or whatever you have, and when you touch something, add to the inventory and delete the object from the world. So if you want to pick up a flower, you walk over a flower, you add 1 to your flower count, the flower vanishes from the world. Okay. Particle effects. QuakeC has very limited particle effects. Lightning bolt, explosion, lava thingy. Not a lot. Lightning 3 is here. Okay. I missed BIM. Yeah, I can do this in BIM, couldn't I? And this is a hard-coded limit. There's what is it, 14? And the modern engines, what they do is they'll like detect that somebody's playing a particle effect and they'll like substitute in a better looking one, but there's still just a list of 14, unfortunately. And that's due to the networking protocol used to talk to them. So that's all you got, and you play them using there's this kind of weird format, just copy and paste, basically. You're actually directly writing to the network stack saying, create a spike particle at this location, da, 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 and it'll spawn a particle effect there. And then you do spawn emitter, spawn system, Niagara. So you can spawn emitters to do like the explosion, particle effects, and things like that. Niagara is kind of the better way of doing it. So you make your own particle effect system using Niagara and then spawn a system. And you can either spawn them at a point or attached or things like that. So Niagara is a very cool system. Definitely better than QuakeC there. QuakeC has a very hard-coded list. And there's no real way of... Like, I've done a lot to, like, hack around this kind of stuff, you know, like mixing and matching and really kind of squeezing water out of stone, but it is definitely a downside to the system because there's just not a way of like adding new particle effects to it because the client has to know about it. So they're all just kind of hard coded in. All right, then animation, and then we'll be done. Animation is done using a weird keyframe system. So basically, these are all functions, and there's this really weird format with like these square brackets And basically, when you do this thing with a square bracket on a function, it basically changes your model. You have an animation frame, and so before it runs the function, it changes your current animation frame to this one, and it says on the next frame of animation, do this one, and so it sets my frame to Xpane 1, and then next frame it's going to call Grunty Xpane 2, and so basically it sets my current animation frame self.animation frame equals Xpane 1, and then on the next animation tick, change it, call this function, and that when that function's called, it sets the animation frame to Xpane 2, call this function, and nothing happens when the function's called other than changing the animation frame and setting a next animation. And so it just basically goes through, it's not even like a keyframe system really, it's just it's just their own weird syntax they have here. And then when it gets to Xpane 6 here, it sets the animation to like when you get shot, it like flinches and reacts, and then it calls Grunty Run, which is back to its normal self again. So Grunty Run is here, and it has all the AI code and things like that. So basically, when you get shot, it'll call Grunty Pain, and so like if you shot him, then it will play the animation if it's taken enough damage or something, and then it'll run through this animation, and then once the animation finishes, it goes back into Grunty Run again. So it's a strange animation system, and each model can have different keyframes on it, and these are kind of the names of the animation models, and that's actually part of the model itself, I think, something like that. So there's different animations all over the place, and it's just all in this weird system here. And then over here in compile, then over here we have the whole animation system, blend space, 2D, animation, blueprints, timelines for simple stuff. Like, okay, so sorry this wasn't the world's most exciting and dynamic and interesting lecture, but what we have here now is like a list of like literally everything you need to do to make a game. In as far as the coding side of it goes, you still have to learn how to make maps in Unreal Engine using the landscaping, stuff like that, but this is actually from the coding side of thing, basically all of the tools you need in your toolbox to make anything, and you're going to just put these things together in different ways to make your games, make your mods. Okay? You guys cool? I'll put this up on the canvas right now. Okay, and then next time we'll go over your mod proposals and your project proposals one more time, and then we're going to start. Basically, you guys are going to start getting into it. We'll just give you lab time in class. Maybe we'll play some games in class, do a little bit of game analysis, because we've been kind of light on that this semester. This semester we've not really been talking about what makes games fun nearly as much as in other semesters, and I do want to kind of get to that, where we play games together and kind of analyze them and see what makes them tick, why they're fun, why they're not fun, that kind of stuff. Okay, so sorry for the kind of boring and info dump style lecture today. It is kind of important to just have a good, complete set of list of tools that you have. How do I play sound? How do I do this? How do I do this? And then you can just refer to it when you make your mod. Okay? Got to get through the boring to get to the fun. Yeah, that's life, you know. But it's going to be a good resource for you. So, Thanks for your indulgence. Thanks for your patience. And I will see you guys on Thursday.